The sand crunches between his teeth. The heat presses down on his back so intensely that it feels like his skin is about to burst. Dan Ray opens his eyes and sees nothing but a reddish haze. He's lying face down in the middle of an endless plain of scorching sand. His first thought comes before the panic. Quartz sand, high in iron oxides, alkaline. Bad for plants, but you can work in it. His second thought is more normal. Where is he? What happened? Why is it so hot? Dan rolls onto his back and squints at the sun. It's white. Not yellow like in Arizona, but white and menacing. The air shimmers over the horizon, and that horizon stretches empty in every direction. No roads, no signposts, no trace of human life. Just sand and sky. Dan sits up. His head is buzzing. His mouth is so dry that his tongue scrapes against his palate. Something is pressing against his wrist. He looks down and sees a bracelet, rusty, mechanical, with tiny gears embedded in the metal. He definitely hasn't worn one like this before. He doesn't remember how he ended up here at all. The last thing he remembers is the glare of headlights and the smell of hot metal. Then darkness, then sand. Dan gets to his feet. His knees are shaking. He takes a step and sinks up to his ankles. The sand is fine and shifting. It's the kind you find where the wind blows nonstop. That means there are constant storms here. That means nothing grows here. That means he can't stay here. He turns and sees movement to the east. Something long and dark is crawling along the crest of a distant dune. A caravan. Creatures resembling camels but larger, with scales instead of fur, with broad, clawed paws that don't sink into the sand. People are following behind them, a dozen or two, in long woven cloaks with hoods pulled down over their eyes. The cargo on the animals is tied down with ropes made of a fiber Dan doesn't recognize. The caravan is heading west. Dan is standing in their path. The first to notice him is an old man in a dark brown cloak. He stops the lead animal and shouts something backward. The words are foreign, not a single familiar sound. Not Arabic, not Farsi. It doesn't sound like anything. A woman approaches the old man. She's about 25, a turquoise cloak with silver embroidery. Her hair is tucked under a headscarf. Her eyes are dark and attentive. She looks at Dan and her expression changes. First, surprise, then pity, then something like weariness. She speaks a phrase softly and slowly. The intonation is clear without translation. Yet one who has come to die. Dan stands before her in clothes unlike anything from their world. A work jacket, jeans, boots with thick soles. No cloak, no hood, no flask. To these people, he looks like a dead man who hasn't gone to rest yet. The old man steps closer. He holds out the flask. Dan takes it and takes a sip. The water is warm and has a mineral taste. He takes another sip and stops. He hands the canteen back. The old man raises his eyebrows in surprise. Apparently, people found in the desert usually drink until someone takes it away. Dan bends down and picks up a pinch of sand. He rubs it between his fingers. He brings it to his nose. He sniffs it. He touches the tip of his tongue to it. He grimaces. The acidity is high, 0 organic matter. But the grain structure isn't bad. It hasn't caked together. It hasn't turned to cement. If there were water here and the right bacteria, this soil could come back to life in 2 seasons. He speaks aloud in English, addressing no one in particular. The soil is dead, not cursed. There's a huge difference. The woman in turquoise exchanges glances with the old man. They don't understand the words, but the old man looks at Dan's hands, at the way he sifts through the sand, at his frowning face, that of a professional who's been shown substandard material. That's how craftsmen look when they're brought defective goods. The old man says something to the woman. She shakes her head. He insists. She sighs and gestures toward the caravan. Let's go. Dan walks. He has no other choice. The caravan moves all day long. Dan walks beside the last lizard and counts his steps to keep his mind off his thirst. He's given water twice, in small portions. He notices that the caravan members drink even less often. Water is more expensive than food here. He notices something else, too. The ground beneath his feet is changing. The sand is getting denser. Rocks appear. Then a dry riverbed. Then something resembling the half-buried foundations of houses. A ghost town. The caravan passes by without stopping. No one even glances at the ruins. They're used to it. For them, it's just another sight. Dan looks. He sees the remains of walls made of fired brick. Good brick. He sees grooves in the stone that were once irrigation channels. There used to be water here. People used to live here. Something used to grow here. And all of it died. By sunset, the caravan reaches a cluster of low mud brick houses. 40 buildings, maybe 50. A well in the center. A few stunted bushes around it. Children stand by the road and stare at the caravan with vacant eyes. Women come out of the houses. There are few men. This settlement is called Saffron. Dan learns the name later. Right now, he sees only what an engineer would see. The well is old. Its walls are lined with stone, but the stone is crumbling. The water level is low. He can tell this by the wet mark on the rope used to pull up the bucket. The water is running out. Maybe in a year this well will be dry, and then these people will leave, or die. An old man from the caravan is talking to one of the locals. He points at Dan. A local man approaches and stares at the stranger expressionlessly. Then he points to a small shelter by the wall of the house at the far end. Sleep here. The gesture is understood in every language. Dan lies down on the clay floor under the shelter. A shadow. His first shadow all day. He closes his eyes and hears the silence. No cars, no airplanes, no hum of an air conditioner. Just the wind and someone's distant cough. He lies there and thinks. Dead earth, a dry well, alkaline soil, constant wind, high solar radiation, low humidity but not zero. At night, the temperature drops. That means there's condensation. That means he can collect water from the air. His brain is working. He can't turn it off, not even here, not even now. He falls asleep with a single thought. I need burlap, clay pots, and copper wire. For 3 days, Dan doesn't speak, not because he doesn't want to. He simply doesn't know a single word of the local language. But he walks. From dawn to dusk, he circles Saffron. Each circle is wider than the last. He climbs the hills north of the settlement. He descends into the dry riverbeds to the east. He touches the stones. He sniffs the earth. He lies down on the sand and presses his ear to the surface. The locals look at him as if he were crazy. Children follow him from a distance and run away when he turns around. A woman in a turquoise robe watches from under the awning by the caravan corral. Her name is Yasmin. Dan doesn't know that yet. He knows something else. The northern hill faces the sea breeze that comes at night. The air at the top of the hill is 5 degrees colder than down below. The temperature difference means condensation. The dry riverbed to the east hasn't completely dried up. At a depth of 2 meters, the sand is dark, damp. There is water. It's just deep down. The well in the center of Saffron taps into an aquifer that is running dry. But 100 meters to the south, there is a small depression where salty mud accumulates after rare rains. This mud can be distilled. Dan draws with charcoal on flat stones, lines, angles, dimensions. 3 designs. The first, a mist-collecting net, a frame made of sticks, burlap stretched vertically. The night breeze passes through the fabric. Moisture condenses on the fibers. It drips into a trough below. From the trough into a pot. Nothing complicated. It works anywhere there is wind and a temperature difference between day and night. Second, a solar still. 2 clay pots, one inside the other. Wet sand or salty mud between them. The sun heats the outer pot. Water evaporates. It condenses on the inner walls. It drips into a container. Pure, fresh water from any kind of mud. Third, A wind-powered well pump. Fabric blades mounted on a wooden frame. Rotation is transmitted through an axle to a piston. The piston pumps water upward. Simple mechanics. No magic, no special materials, just the right geometry. On the fourth morning, Dan goes to see the elder. The elder's name is Farid. He is a large man in his 60s with a sun-weathered face and heavy hands. He looks at Dan without hostility, but also without interest. Just another mouth to feed. Dan places 3 stones with drawings on them in front of him. He points at them. Then he points at the sky. Then he makes a gesture with his hands. Water. Drops. He cups his hands and mimics something being poured into them. Farid looks at the blueprints. He doesn't understand the lines and numbers, but he sees that the stranger isn't asking for food. He isn't asking for water. He's asking for work. Farid calls over 2 young men. They're young and strong. One of them is Farid's son. The other is an orphan they took in 3 years ago. Dan leads them to the northern hill. He gestures to show what needs to be done. Dig 4 posts, stretch burlap between them. Under the bottom edge of the burlap, lay out a trough of flat stones coated with clay. Place a pot at the end of the trough. The young men work in silence. They don't understand why, but Farid told them to do it, and they do it. By sunset, the net is in place, 3 meters wide, 2 meters high. The burlap sags a little, but that's actually better, more surface area for condensation. Dan checks the trough. He adjusts the angle. He nods. Now they wait for nightfall. The night in Saffron is cold. The temperature drops from 40 to 15 in the 3 hours after sunset. The breeze from the north arrives exactly as Dan calculated. He sits at the foot of the hill and listens. Silence. The wind. The fabric rustles. In the morning, Dan climbs the hill first. The pot at the base of the net is 1/3 full, clear, transparent water, about 4 liters, from the air. No magic, no well, no guardians. He stands over the pot and looks at the water. His hands are shaking, not from the cold, from realization. His knowledge is working, here, in this world. The physics are the same. Condensation is the same. Water is everywhere. You just have to know how to get it. The guys arrive an hour later. They see the pot. One of them drops to his knees and touches the water with his finger. Then he looks at Dan, then at the sky, then back at the water. He says something quickly and quietly. Dan doesn't understand the words, but his voice is trembling. Over the next 2 days, Dan builds a still and a wind pump. The still is simpler, 2 pots, salty mud from the bottom of the depression. The sun does all the work. 1 liter a day. Not much, but it's a liter out of nothing, out of mud that used to be thrown away. The wind pump is more complicated. It needs an axle, it needs blades, it needs a piston. Dan uses old copper wire from a caravan's harness. Yasmin hands it over without a word. She's been watching him for 4 days now. She looks strange, like someone watching a magician and trying to figure out the trick. The pump is installed on the well by the end of the 6th day. The blades spin in the constant wind. The piston pumps. Water rises from a depth the bucket could no longer reach. The well hasn't run dry. It had simply become too deep to draw by hand. But the pump pulls water from it effortlessly. On the 7th day, Saffron has 20 liters of clean water per day, in addition to what the well provides. 20 liters from the air, the dirt, and the wind. Farid comes to the fence on the hill. He stands there for a long time. He watches as drops gather on the burlap and trickle down. Slowly and heavily, he sits down right in the dust. His lips move. He speaks quietly, and Dan makes out 2 words that are repeated. The first sounds like a question. The second sounds like a name. Dan sits down beside him. He wipes his hands on his shirt. He replies in English, knowing they won't understand him. "I'm an engineer. It's just physics." Farid looks at him. He doesn't understand the words, but he understands something in this man's face, something simple and important. This stranger isn't a prophet, not a magician, not a saint. He's a craftsman. He makes things that work. By evening on the 7th day, a rumor is spreading through Saffron, one that Dan will hear hundreds of times over the next few months. The one who made a deal with the air. He picks up the language faster than Dan expected. After 2 weeks, he understands simple phrases. After 3, he speaks in short sentences like a child. Give, water, there. Dig, here. No, not like that. He doesn't stop to wonder why learning comes so easily. He attributes it to immersion. When everyone around you speaks only one language and survival depends on understanding, the brain works at its limit. The bracelet on his wrist is slightly warm, always. Dan notices this but doesn't think much of it. Metal heats up in the sun. That makes sense. What doesn't make sense are the dreams. Every night he sees words. Symbols of the local script float in the darkness like glowing fish. In the morning, he knows their meaning. But he isn't thinking about that yet. There's no time to think. There's too much work. 20 liters a day save Saffron from immediate death, but not from a slow one. People need food. Food is plants. Plants are water plus soil plus time. He's learned how to get water. Now it's the soil's turn. Dan spends 3 days studying the ground around Saffron. He walks around with a shovel made for him by a local carpenter. He digs holes. He examines the layers. He sniffs each one. Alkaline sand on top. Beneath it, a layer of baked clay. Beneath the clay, rock. Everything is dead. No worms, no roots, no smell of decaying earth that signals life. But on the western edge of Saffron, there's a ravine. It's not very deep. The bottom is covered with a dark crust. Dan breaks the crust and sees a thin layer of something brown and damp beneath it. He brings it to his nose. It smells, faintly, but it smells. Organic matter. Somewhere here, long ago, there was a stream. Leaves and twigs were washed into the ravine. They rotted, they piled up. Then the stream dried up and everything froze beneath the crust. But the bacteria inside are alive. They're sleeping, waiting for water. Dan carries the sample back. He soaks it in water from the fog collector. 2 days later, the sample starts to smell stronger. The bacteria have woken up. He sets up 5 pots with different mixtures: sand, sand with clay and organic matter from the ravine, sand with clay, organic matter, and water, and sand with clay, organic matter, water, and finely ground bark from the shrub growing by the ravine. The 5th pot interests him the most. If the local shrubs survive, it means their roots contain mycorrhiza, symbiotic fungi that help plants extract water from dry soil. If these fungi are transferred to the dead soil via the roots and bark, they might take hold and prepare the ground for planting. It is precisely during these days that Mira appears. Dan is working on his pots at dawn when he hears footsteps. The girl is standing 3 meters away from him. She is short, thin, her dark hair is tied back with a strip of leather. Her hands are covered in calluses and small burns, the hands of a blacksmith. She is 19 years old. Her father died a year ago before finishing his last commission, a water wheel for the village further down the trade trail. Since then, Mira has been working alone in his workshop. She shoes lizards, sharpens knives, and makes nails. She didn't come for water. Everyone in Saffron comes to Dan for water. She came for something else. She looks at the pots, at the charcoal markings, at the drawings scattered among the stones, and she speaks slowly, choosing simple words so that a stranger might understand. Explain how. Don't just give it to me. Explain. Dan looks up at her. She isn't smiling. She's completely serious. He takes a piece of charcoal and points to the pot with sample number 5. He draws a circle on the stone. This is the earth. He draws little dots. This is the life inside, very small, invisible. It eats the dead and creates the living. He points to a piece of bark from the ravine. It sleeps here. She needs water and warmth. Mira listens. She crouches down next to him. She takes a second piece of charcoal and draws an arrow from the dots to the plant. She asks, "They feed the roots." Dan freezes. She understood it the first time. Not the mechanics, not the details. She understood the principle. The tiny life in the soil feeds the larger life above, from a single picture. He nods. Yes, they feed the roots. From that day on, Mira comes every morning. She listens, she draws, she asks questions that sometimes make Dan stop and think because she sees things from a different angle. She's not an engineer, she's a blacksmith. She thinks through the material, through her hands, through the way metal bends and stone cracks. And that's a different kind of mind, valuable, important. By the start of the second month, Dan is ready for the next step. The first serious water collection system. Not a pot, but a system. He chooses a spot on the northern slope of the same hill where the fog collector stands. He draws up a plan. 12 nets instead of 1. A stone reservoir at the foot of the slope, covered with a lid made of clay slabs to prevent the water from evaporating. A channel runs from the reservoir to the settlement. Mira sketches alongside him. Her lines are neater than his, smoother. She's used to working with precision. Fareed provides the workers, 10 people, skeptical and tired but willing to give it a try. Dan shows each person what to do. Mira translates his awkward phrases into plain language. Construction takes 12 days. In the end, a structure stands on the hill that collects 200 liters of water per day. 200 liters. About 160 people live in Safran. That's more than a liter per person per day. Just from the air, plus a well with a pump, plus distillers. For the first time in years, Safran has more water than it needs to survive. There's a surplus. And a surplus means opportunity. They can water their crops, they can plant, they can live, not just eke out an existence. Dan stands by the reservoir and watches as the water slowly rises inside. Yasmin approaches from behind. She had been silent all these weeks. She's been watching. Her turquoise robe is dusty. She hasn't gone anywhere in a long time. The caravan left without her 2 weeks ago. She stayed behind. And now she stands beside him, looking at the water with an expression Dan can't read. She asks quietly, "You're not a mage, no. You're not a priest, no. What are you?" Dan thinks. He searches for a word in the local language. He can't find one. He answers as best he can. "I'm a person who knows how things work." Yasmin is silent. Then she speaks even more quietly. "My gift is water. I can sense water underground. I can bring it up if it's not too deep, but it costs me strength, a lot of strength. And you gathered water from the wind using sticks and a rag." Dan doesn't hear admiration in her voice. He hears fear. If his methods work without magic, then why are the guardians needed? Why is she needed? Dan assembles the first prototype of the cedar from whatever he has on hand. A wooden frame, a wheel from a broken cart, a copper tube with holes spaced at equal intervals, a hopper made from a leather sack. The principle is simple. The wheel rolls along the ground. Through a system of levers, each rotation pushes a rod that opens a hole in the tube. The seed falls into the furrow evenly at the same depth with the same distance between seeds. In his world, such machines had existed since the 18th century. Here, people sow by hand, by the handful. Half the seeds land too close together, and half are planted too deep. Seed waste is enormous. Germination rates are low. The cedar solves both problems. Mira works with him. She makes the metal parts. Dan sketches, and she cuts and bends the copper as if she can feel the geometry with her fingertips. When he explains why a certain angle of inclination is needed for the tube, she nods even before he finishes his sentence. She sees the answer before she hears the question. This both amazes and worries him. He thinks about it at night when he can't sleep. She grasps his ideas too quickly. She copies them too precisely. He fears that if this continues, she'll become a reflection of him rather than an independent engineer. She needs to learn to think for herself, not like him, but as her own person. But now is not the time for pedagogical subtleties. It's planting season, and every day counts. Dan chooses a plot south of Saffron, a gentle slope. The soil is prepared. For 2 weeks, he's been adding a mixture from the ravine to it. The bacteria are at work. The earth is changing color from gray to brown. It smells damp, a good sign. Now they need plants. Not just any plants, the first ones, the pioneers, the ones that will survive in nearly dead soil and prepare it for those that follow. Dan searches the surrounding area. He finds 3 types of shrubs clinging to life near wells and in the shade of rocks. One has long roots that extend 2 meters down. Another has small, tough leaves that lose almost no moisture. The third has a dense network of surface roots that hold the sand in place. Perfect. The long roots will reach the water, the tough leaves will withstand the sun, the surface roots will stop erosion. 3 plants, 3 functions, 1 system. He collects cuttings. He soaks them in water mixed with ground bark to stimulate growth. He plants them in a semicircle along the contour of the slope. Between the rows of shrubs, he digs a drainage ditch, a shallow trench running horizontally along the slope. Water from infrequent rains and condensation won't run downhill and be lost. It will collect in the ditch, be absorbed, and remain there. This is contour farming, an old technique, a simple one. But in this world, no one has heard of it. Farid looks at the ditches and doesn't understand. Why dig a hole that holds nothing? Dan tries to explain. He speaks slowly. Water flows downward, always downward. The ditch catches the water stays. The plants drink it. Farid shakes his head, but he doesn't argue. He's seen a pot filled with water from thin air. He no longer argues with this man. The first planting goes quietly. No celebration. 20 cuttings in the ground, watered from the reservoir, surrounded by stones for shade in the early days. Dan stands over them and feels what he feels every time he plants. Anticipation, anxiety, hope. Will they take root or not? He's not God. He can't force them to grow. He can only create the conditions and wait. A week later, 4 of the 20 cuttings die. The remaining 16 survive. 2 of them produce new shoots, tiny green dots against a gray background. Dan sees them in the morning and stands motionless for a long time. Then he says quietly in English, "Welcome." Yasmin changes over these weeks. She stops just observing and starts asking questions. But her questions are different from Mira's. Mira asks how. Yasmin asks why. Why are you doing this for free? Why are you teaching people instead of selling water? Why do you live in a mud hut when you could demand the elder's house? Dan answers simply, because it's the right thing to do. Yasmin looks at him for a long time. She grew up in a family of guardians, albeit an impoverished branch. Even at the very bottom of the clan hierarchy, but still in a family where water is a commodity, where every liter has a price, where a hydromancer's gift is capital, not a calling. Dan's words are like a language from another world to her. She cannot understand his motives because such motives do not exist in her world. But she watches, and something inside her shifts, slowly, like a tectonic plate. The end of the 3rd month. A child is born in Saffron, the first in 10 years. The mother is young. Her name is Latifa. She's afraid she won't have enough milk, that the air is too dry for the baby, that the child will get sick. Dan learns about this that evening from Mira. He can't sleep that night. He sits in the workshop that Farid had set aside for him in an empty shed by the well. He works by the light of an oil lamp. By morning, a small device stands before him, a clay bowl with porous walls, wet sand inside, a piece of fabric stretched over a frame on top. The wind passes through the porous clay. The moisture from the sand evaporates. The air around it becomes more humid and cooler, a very simple humidifier for a single cradle. He brings it in the morning. He places it next to the basket where the baby lies. He says nothing. He leaves. Latifa doesn't understand what it is. Mira explains it to her. The air near the baby will be gentler. It'll be easier for him to breathe. Latifa takes Mira's hand and holds on to it for a long time. That evening, Mira sits alone in the workshop. In front of her is a sketch of the new water catchment system that she and Dan are building together. She picks up a piece of charcoal. In the lower right corner, she draws a small heart. Neat, delicate. Then she turns the drawing face down and leaves. She doesn't show it to anyone. The 4th month. Dan wakes up to a scream, sharp, frightened. He jumps up and runs out of the shed. The sky is gray, not from the clouds, from the dust. The wind has picked up in the pre-dawn twilight and is now driving a wall of sand from the east. A sandstorm. People rush out of their houses and haul inside whatever they can carry. Animals are herded under sheds. Children are picked up and carried. Dan runs toward the hill. It's his water collection site. 12 nets are set up on the open slope. If the storm tears them down, he'll lose weeks of work. Mira is already there. She ran faster. She stands in the wind, trying to secure the outermost pole, which is swaying. The wind knocks her off her feet. She gets up and tries again. Dan grabs the rope and, together with her, wraps it around the post. He ties it to a rock at the base. The sand cuts into his hands. Tiny quartz shards fly like needles. They manage to save 8 of the 12 nets. 4 are torn to shreds. The reservoir is intact. The lid made of clay slabs held up, but the trench leading to the settlement is clogged with sand all the way through. The storm lasts 2 days. When it subsides, Saffron looks as if someone had poured another half-meter of desert onto it. Sand is in every crevice, in the food, in the water, in their lungs. 3 old men are coughing up blood. Dan sits in the ruined workshop, staring at his blueprints covered in red dust. 4 screens are destroyed. The trench is clogged. 2 distillers have cracked. It'll take a week of work to repair them. But the problem runs deeper. The storms will come again and again. Saffron stands on the edge of the wasteland of silence, and nothing protects it from the wind. We need a wall, not a stone one, a living one, a windbreak, a row of trees or shrubs that stands in the wind's path and breaks its force. It slows it down. It diverts the sand. It protects everything behind it. Dan knows how this works. In the Sahel and the steppes of Central Asia, windbreaks have halted desertification for decades. Long rows of trees, perpendicular to the wind's direction, dense at the base, sparse at the top. The wind flows around them rather than breaking them. But trees grow slowly. It takes years. Saffron doesn't have years to spare. The next storm could hit in a month. So a combination is needed, fast and slow. A wall of stones and dry bushes for immediate protection. Behind it, a row of saplings for long-term protection. As long as the stones hold back the wind, the saplings will grow. In 2 years, the saplings will form a windbreak, and the stones will no longer be needed. He explains this to Farid. Farid listens. For the first time in all these months, his face is open, without the mask of patience, without polite skepticism. He saw the storm. He saw that Dan's structures were damaged but not destroyed. He saw Mira run up the hill before anyone else. He understands. This stranger isn't just doing things. He's building the future. And the future must be protected. Farid provides 20 men, everyone who can work. For the next 3 weeks, Saffron builds a wall. First, the stones. They haul them from the dry riverbed to the east, large boulders for the foundation, smaller ones in between. They fill the gaps with branches and clay. The wall isn't tall, 1.5 meters, but it's long, 200 meters, forming a semicircle from the northern hill to the southern hollow. Dan calculated the layout so that the wall would face the east wind at a 30-degree angle, not head-on, but at an angle. The wind glides along the wall rather than hitting it head-on. Less pressure, less damage. Behind the wall, Dan and Mira are planting shrubs, those same 3 species, densely, in 2 rows. Between the rows are ditches to collect water. They're adding a mixture from the ravine to the soil around the roots. Bacteria, fungi, organic matter, everything they've grown in pots over the past 2 months. Planting takes place in the 3rd week of the 4th month. 40 cuttings in the first row, 30 in the second, all watered, all surrounded by stones. All are labeled. Dan labels each planting spot, for Farid's house, for Salih's family, for Latifa's mother. Each bush belongs to a specific family. When it grows, it will be their bush, their shade, their protection from the wind. People come to look at the plants labeled with their names. They touch the sticks with labels stuck in the ground. Some stand silently and watch. One old man comes every day and waters his bush with his own ration of water. Dan tries to explain to him that the irrigation system is shared and that he shouldn't waste drinking water. The old man won't listen. It's his bush. He waters it. In the middle of the 5th month, what Dan had been waiting for and dreading begins. A caravan. A trade caravan. A large one. 20 animals. 30 guards. It travels along the southern trail and stops in Saffron for the night. The caravan members enter the settlement and settle in. They see greenery. Small, timid, but greenery nonetheless. Bushes along the wall, sprouts on the slope, wet earth around the reservoir. They see water flowing down a channel from the hill without magic, without the keeper, without anything. Their faces. Dan will remember those faces for a long time. Not joy, not surprise, horror. Because if this is possible, if water can be drawn from the air using sticks and rags, if the earth can be brought back to life without magic, then the entire world of Al-Karish is built on a lie. The Guardian's monopoly, the power of the clans, the church that says the desert is God's will. All of this rests on a single belief. Without magic, there is no water. And here stands a man without a shred of magical gift, and water is dripping from a burlap sack behind him. The caravan leaves in the morning, but Dan knows. Rumors will spread. Rumors are already spreading. Merchants will tell the story in every settlement along the way, in every city, at every market. A small village on the edge of the wasteland, a stranger without magic, water from thin air. Within a month, every clan of the Guardians will know about it. Within 2 months, the Church of the Single Flame. In 3 months, someone will come. Not for water, for him. Dan stands on the hill and watches the caravan head south, tiny figures in the heat haze. He feels the bracelet on his wrist, warm, slightly warmer than usual. And somewhere on the edge of his consciousness, a faint itch, like a distant sound, like a voice from beneath the thick sand. He rubs his wrist and goes back to work. 20 more cuttings are waiting to be planted. Time is short. The 6th month. The saffron is unrecognizable. A wall of stones and shrubs stretches in a semicircle along the eastern edge. 40 out of 70 cuttings have taken root. Some are already knee-high. The stiff, dark leaves glisten in the sun as if lacquered. The roots have burrowed deep and found the moisture driven there by the drainage ditches. The catchment on the hill consistently yields 180 liters per day. Dan repaired 4 screens after the storm and added 3 more. The well with the pump is running smoothly. Mira replaces the worn piston parts herself. She no longer asks Dan how. She knows. On the southern slope, the first section of contour plantings is turning green. 16 bushes from the first batch are standing strong. Between them, something new is pushing through the ground. Grass. Not planted by Dan. Wild. The seeds had lain in the soil for years, waiting. The water came, and they awoke. Dan stands on the slope, looking at the thin green threads poking out of the brown earth. This is the best result he could have imagined. The ecosystem is beginning to function on its own. He created the conditions. Nature is doing the rest. Yasmin comes to him that evening. She sits down next to him by the workshop. She takes out a thin blade of grass. She lights it. The sweetish smoke drifts upward. She is silent for a long time. Then she speaks. You know that people from Kalat-Sura will be arriving in 3 days. Dan doesn't know. Kalat-Sura, a city 6 days' journey to the south, one of the major trading hubs. Yasmin explains. Caravan drivers who passed through Saffron 2 months ago told them. Now everyone knows. Kalat-Sura has sent a delegation, 3 people, a trade representative and 2 guards. They want to see you. Dan nods. He was expecting this. Yasmin snuffs out her stick on a rock. You don't understand. Kalat-Sura pays tribute to the Alzaran clan for water, 3,000 gold pieces a year. If they find out they can extract water without the Guardians, they'll stop paying. Alzaran will lose income, and Alzaran doesn't lose income, ever. Dan remains silent. Yasmin looks him in the eyes. You're building water collection systems. They're hiring assassins. You understand the difference in speed. He understands. The delegation arrives in 3 days, just as Yasmin said. The sales representative's name is Majid. Short, overweight, with quick eyes that take everything in. The number of houses, the number of people, the amount of greenery. He takes it all in, and his expression changes. At first, he didn't believe it. Now he does. And he's calculating. Dan shows him the water collection system, the reservoir, the cedar, the contour planting. Majid listens. He nods. He asks questions through Yasmin because Dan is still speaking slowly and making mistakes. How much does one net cost? How long does it take to install? How many people are needed? Dan answers honestly. The net costs almost nothing. Sticks, burlap, clay, time. Majid falls silent. Then he says a number. 3,000 gold coins a year. That's how much his city pays for water, for what Dan makes out of sticks and rags. 3,000 gold coins. He laughs, short and bitter. Then he becomes serious and says he'll be back with a proposal. The delegation leaves. Dan stands at the gate and knows he has set in motion a process that can no longer be stopped. 2 weeks after Majid's visit, a woman arrives in Saffron, alone, without a caravan, without guards, on foot. She's coming from the desert to the east, dusty, thin, with a sack on her back and a burn on her left arm that's already healing, though it's clear it was serious. Her name is Hane Soyun. She is 22 years old. She is a runaway apprentice from the Alchemy Guild in the Eastern Territories. She doesn't say exactly where she's from or why she fled, not right away. At first, she says something else. She's heard about a man who brings the earth back to life. She wants to see it. Dan takes her to the workshop and shows her pots with soil samples. 5 pots, 5 different compositions, 3 months of observations, records etched in charcoal on stones. Hane takes pot number 5, that very one, the one with bacteria and mycorrhiza. She brings it to her face. She sniffs it. She rubs a pinch between her fingers. She closes her eyes, and she says quietly, 3 types of bacteria, 2 fungal strains. One of them is nitrogen-fixing. Dan freezes. She identified the composition by touch and smell, without a microscope, without analysis. Alchemical training, years of working with compounds and enzymes. She knows microbiology just as well as he does, maybe better, just from a different angle. He knows the theory, she knows the practice. He knows the why, she knows the exactly how. That night, Hane tells him, not everything, but enough. She had been an apprentice in the Grey Root Guild in the East. The guild dealt with fermentation and alchemical compounds, medicines, poisons, dyes, fertilizers. Hane specialized in living cultures, bacteria, fungi, yeast. She cultivated them, studied them, and talked to them. My little ones, that's what she called them. Her mother fell ill. It was serious, a lung disease caused by dust, a common cause of death in the eastern lands. Hane found a recipe for a medicine in the old guild books, a forbidden recipe. The guild sold medicines at high prices. This recipe made it possible to produce the medicine cheaply using readily available fungi. Haim broke the ban. She made the medicine. Her mother died before it took effect. And the guild found out. She was declared a criminal. She was expelled. Her records were burned. She fled west across the desert and made her way to Saffron, drawn by rumors of a man who does the impossible. Dan listens in silence. Then he stands up. He walks to the shelf. He takes out pot number 3. He places it in front of her. I need your help. These bacteria from the ravine, they work, but slowly. Too slowly. To revive the soil in a single season, I need a concentrate, a starter culture. You can do this. Hain looks at the jar, then at him. Her eyes are wet, but her voice is firm. Show me your ravine. They walk to the ravine at dawn. Hain spends the whole day there. She collects samples, sniffs them, tastes them, sorts them. By evening, she has a plan. Over the course of 2 weeks, Hain sets up in the workshop what Dan mentally calls a soil microbiology lab. Clay vessels with cultures, temperature control via solar traps and nighttime cooling, culture media made from ground bark and mineral supplements that she prepares herself. Her hands work like instruments, precisely, quickly, without any unnecessary movements. By the end of the 6th month, they have their first batch of concentrate, a brown liquid with a sharp, earthy smell. 1 liter of this mixture revives 1 square meter of dead soil in a month instead of half a year. Dan looks at the bottle and thinks, this is something he can work with. With this, he can change everything. The 7th month begins with a knife. Dan wakes up to find someone standing over him. Darkness. The oil lamp has gone out. He feels a shift in the air and rolls aside a split second before something strikes the clay floor where his head had been resting. The sound is dull. Metal against clay. He jumps up. Total darkness. He hears breathing. Someone else's. Rapid. A person is moving toward him. Dan grabs the first thing that comes to hand. A wooden beam from an unfinished seed drill. Heavy. Long. He swings it and hits something soft. A scream, a man's, the sound of running feet. The workshop door swings open and a dark figure vanishes into the night. Dan stands in the darkness. His hands are shaking. His heart is pounding so he can hear it in his ears. He turns on the lamp. A knife lies on the floor, long, narrow, with a brand on the handle. 2 crossed crescents. In the morning, Yasmin sees the knife and her face goes pale. Al-Zarin, the clan's mercenary brand. She picks up the knife and turns it over. There are notches on the back of the handle. 3. This means the knife is intended to kill a specific person, and 1/3 of the payment has already been made. 2/3 will be paid after death is confirmed. They sit in the workshop. Mira, Yasmin, Hane, Dan. In silence. Then Yasmin says what everyone already understands. This is the first one. There will be more. The clan doesn't send just one. They send a wave. The first one tries. If it doesn't work, the second one comes. If that doesn't work, a group comes. Dan looks at the knife. He's never fought in his life. Not for real. Not against someone who came to kill him. He's an engineer. He builds things. He doesn't know how to defend himself against things that break things. Mira speaks softly. I can forge blades. My father taught me. Dan shakes his head. We won't fight with swords. We'll lose. There are 40 courtyards of us. They have an army. So what? Dan thinks. For a long time. For 3 hours, he walks around Saffron along his usual route. He looks at the hills, at the wall, at the road from the south. Then he returns and says, we won't fight. We'll know. The first thing we need is a signaling system, he explains. 4 observation posts on the hills surrounding Saffron. Each post can see the next one. Each has a mirror made of polished copper. During the day, it reflects the light. At night, a fire. Any movement on the approaches to Saffron is spotted and relayed from post to post within minutes. Early warning. Time to react. Mira makes the mirrors in 2 days. 4 copper discs polished to a shine. Farid assigns 8 observers, in shifts, around the clock. Second, Dan relocates the workshop. He moves all the blueprints and notes to the basement under Farid's house. He himself sleeps elsewhere every night. No one except Mira and Yasmin knows where he spends the night. If they come again, they'll find an empty workshop. Third, the code. Dan begins recording the blueprints not directly, but through a system of symbols known only to him and Mira. If the blueprints are stolen, they'll be useless without the key. Mira memorizes the code in a single evening. She memorizes everything in one go. It's scary. It's awe-inspiring. It reminds Dan that he isn't the only smart person in the room, and that's a good thing. Fourth, Yasmin. Dan turns to her and says, "You know the clans. You know how they think. I need your voice, not water magic, your voice." Yasmin looks at him. For the first time in all these months, there's something in her eyes besides observation, something warm, fleeting. She hides it behind her usual sarcasm. "You want me to be your diplomat. I want you to be our shield, of a different kind." She nods. From that day on, Yasmin takes charge of all contact with the outside world. The caravans passing through Saffron speak with her. She filters the information. She weeds out spies. She steers rumors. She does this masterfully because she grew up in a world where every word is a coin and every silence is a bet. The fifth, the most important. Dan begins to teach, for real. Not just one Mira, 5 Miras. Hane, Farid's son Rasul. 2 young women from Saffron, Zaina and Noura. Every evening in Farid's basement, Dan draws and explains. The principles of condensation, contour farming, microbiology, mechanics. Not the details of specific machines, but the principles, why it works, how to reinvent it if the blueprint is lost. He tells them straight out. If I'm killed, this knowledge must not die with me. You 5 are this knowledge. Each of you must be able to build a water collection system from scratch. Each of you must be able to train the next 5. Mira stays behind after one such evening. Everyone has left, but she remains seated. She looks at the blueprints. Then she says, "You say, if I'm killed, as if it were just a condition in a problem." Dan sits down across from her. Because it is a condition in the problem. The problem goes like this. How to ensure that a single village on the edge of the desert survives and thrives, even if the person who started it perishes. The answer? Distributed knowledge. 5 students, each of whom will teach 5 others. In 2 generations, it will be a network that cannot be destroyed by killing just one person. Mira is silent. Then she says, even more quietly, "What if I don't want to solve a problem in which you aren't included?" Dan doesn't answer. He doesn't know what to say. He's an engineer. He solves problems with specific conditions. This condition is unfamiliar to him. The 8th month brings a second mercenary. This one is smarter than the first. He doesn't come at night with a knife. He comes during the day, like a merchant, with goods, with a smile. He spends 2 days in Saffron. He sells fabrics. He talks to people. He asks about the stranger who makes water. Yasmin notices him on the 2nd day. Something about his questions is off. They're too specific. Where he sleeps, when he goes out, who's with him. She tells Dan. Dan doesn't sleep that night. He sits in the basement and thinks. In the morning, the merchant leaves. Nothing happens. But a week later, 5 men appear on the southern road, on horseback, armed. They are not merchants. The signal post on the southern hill flashes a coppery glow 2 hours before their arrival. Saffron is ready. Farid meets them at the gate. 10 men are with him. They have no swords. They have pitchforks and pickaxes and heavy hammers for stone. The 5 horsemen look around. They had expected a sleepy village. They see people standing and waiting and who are not afraid. The eldest of the 5 asks about the stranger. Farid replies calmly, "There is no stranger here. He left a month ago." The horsemen don't believe him, but they don't want to enter a village where 10 men with hammers are standing. That's not their mission. Their mission was to be quiet, fast, without a trace. It didn't turn out quiet. They ride off. Dan sits in the basement and listens as the pounding of hooves fades upstairs. The bracelet on his wrist is hot, not warm, hot. He takes it off and looks at it. The gears inside the metal have shifted slightly, as if something had turned, as if the mechanism had woken up for a split second and then fallen silent again. The 9th month. Hayne spends her nights in the lab. She hasn't slept properly in 2 weeks. Dan can tell by the dark circles under her eyes and the way she talks to her cultures. "My little ones, come on, just a little more." She's working on the 2nd generation of a bacterial concentrate. The 1st generation revitalizes the soil within a month, but requires constant watering. Hayne wants to create a formula that will take root in the soil and work autonomously without daily care. A self-replicating soil culture. Dan understands the scale of the task. In his world, laboratories with budgets in the millions worked on projects like this. Hayne works in a clay shed by the light of an oil lamp, using pots instead of test tubes. And she's close to a solution. One night, Dan comes into the lab and finds her sleeping on the floor next to a row of vessels. He covers her with his jacket. He sits down beside her and waits for dawn. He looks at the rows of pots with labels written in her own hand. Small, neat handwriting. Next to each name is a tiny drawing. She draws faces on her bacteria. Smiling ones, sad ones, sleepy ones. As if they were children in a classroom. He smiles. For the first time in months, he just smiles in the dark, and no one sees him. Hayne wakes up at dawn. She sees the jacket. She sees that he's sitting next to her. Silently, she brushes her hair away from her face and says, "The 3rd series yielded results. Strain 14B took hold in the sand matrix and began colonization without additional water after 16 hours. Dan stands up. Strain 14B. It sounds like a name from his past world, from the lab in New Mexico. For a second, he feels a twinge of something like longing. Then he looks at Hayne, and the twinge passes. She's here. Work is here. Life is here. By the end of the 9th month, strain 14B has been tested on 3 plots. It works. Soil treated with this concentrate begins to retain moisture on its own after 3 weeks, without any additional watering beyond what condensation and occasional rains provide. This is a breakthrough. It changes everything. Before, every square meter of restored land required daily attention. Now you can treat it and walk away. The land will come back to life on its own. It's scalable. Meanwhile, Mira is finishing the project she'd been working on without Dan, her own. She modified the cedar. Dan's version was functional but clunky. Mira redesigned the frame, making it lighter. She replaced the wooden levers with copper ones. She added a 2nd hopper to apply Hayne concentrate simultaneously with the seeds. A cedar fertilizer. 2 operations in a single pass. Dan looks at the blueprint and the finished machine and says nothing. Then he speaks. "This is better than my version." Mira doesn't reply, but her shoulders straighten slightly, and in the lower right corner of the drawing is a small heart. Dan knows about it now. He noticed it 3 weeks ago. He was going through the drawings in the basement and saw it. A small charcoal sketch. Neat. On every drawing that Mira had done herself. He didn't tell her. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what he's feeling. He only knows that when he picks up a drawing without a heart in the corner, he feels a slight emptiness, as if something is missing. The 10th month brings news. Bad news. Yasmin is returning from a trading post halfway between here and Safran. Her face is ashen. She spoke with caravan drivers from the south. The city of Kalat Sura, the very same one Majid came from. The El Zarin clan has raised the price of water, doubled it. Majid protested. He was found dead in his own home. Officially, it was bandits. Unofficially, everyone knows the truth. A message. Anyone who thinks of independence from the Guardians will die. Yasmin speaks calmly, without emotion, but her hands are shaking and she hides them behind her back. Majid was a good man. He wanted freedom for his city. He was killed for coming here, for seeing water in burlap sacks and believing things could be different. Dan stands and listens. Something heavy and cold weighs on him. He's an engineer. He builds things. He wasn't prepared for people to die because of his inventions, not because of his inventions, because of them, because they exist, because they change the way things are. He leaves Saffron. He walks up the hill. He sits down by the water catchment and looks at the horizon. To the south, somewhere beyond the dunes, lies the city where a man was killed for dreaming of free water. He sits there until sunset. Then he stands up. He returns. He gathers everyone in the basement: Mira, Yasmin, Hain, Rasul, Zaina, Noura, and Farid. He speaks. We cannot remain just one village. One village can be destroyed. One water collection point can be demolished. One person can be killed. We need more. We need many villages, many water catchments, many people who know. He raises his hand. 7 fingers, 7 valleys. Along the edge of the wasteland, there are 6 places where conditions are similar to Saffron's: wind, temperature fluctuations, remnants of old aquifers. He's studied the maps Yasmin gathered from the merchants. He knows where. If every valley gets a watershed and a trained team, within a year we can create a belt, a green belt, a chain of living settlements that rely not on a single person, but on knowledge, on a principle. Kill one, and 9 will carry on. Burn one village, and 6 others will remain standing. This isn't a machine. It's a network, and you can't kill a network. Mira looks at him. 7 valleys, 7 teams. He nods, and the first team leaves in a month. Farid slaps his palm on the table. In a month. Winter. Dan shakes his head. Winters here are mild. The temperature doesn't drop below 10. Condensation works better than in summer because the temperature difference is greater. The best time to install the water collection systems. Farid is silent, then he nods. The 11th month. The first team leaves Saffron. Rasul is leading. With him are Zaina and 2 guys from Saffron who learned how to build water collectors from Mira. 4 people, 2 pack animals carrying supplies, burlap, copper wire, tools, pots of Hain concentrate, blueprints encrypted and hidden in the lining of the saddles. They're heading northwest to a place the caravanners call the Gorge of Dawn, a narrow valley between 2 rocky ridges. The wind from the sea blows through it like through a pipe, the perfect spot for fog collectors. 20 families live there. The well dried up a year ago. They drink imported water and pay through the nose for it. Rasul is nervous. He's never been this far from home. Dan puts a hand on his shoulder and says, "You know everything I know. You'll be fine." Rasul nods. He's not sure, but he sets off. Mira walks him to the first hill. She returns in silence. She sits down in the workshop and works until nightfall. She doesn't cry. She makes the loops for the new cedar with such force that the copper bends on the first strike. Dan understands. Rasul is like a younger brother to her. It's hard to let him go. The second team leaves in a week. Noura is the way. They head south toward a dried-up oasis that the locals call Miran's Tear. No one lives there, but the aquifer is close to the surface. Yasmin confirmed it. She can sense water from a distance if she concentrates. The third team is formed when Soyan arrives in Saffron. She doesn't come alone. With her is an old lizard-like creature loaded with wooden crates. The crates contain blueprints, hundreds of blueprints, on thin, tanned leather, on paper, on metal plates, blueprints of machines. Soyan Pak, 24 years old. the daughter of a mechanical engineer named Master Pak. He served at the court of the Southern Kingdom. He designed irrigation systems, automatic mills, and clockwork mechanisms for the royal gardens. Then he built a machine without permission from the Church of the Single Flame, a new type of water pump, powerful, efficient, capable of drawing water from a depth of 30 meters. The church declared the machine heresy. Master Pak was executed. His workshop was burned down. His name was erased from all records. Soyeon saved the blueprints. She sewed them into the lining of her clothes. She stuffed them into the hollow legs of a table. She hid them inside the walls of drawers. For 3 years, she wandered under a false name. She worked as an apprentice in blacksmith shops. She repaired locks. She made gears for mills. She listened to rumors. When she heard about saffron, she ran so fast she forgot to pay for her last night's lodging. She bursts into Dan's workshop with a box in her hands and dumps the blueprints onto the table. Her eyes are ablaze. Her hands are shaking, not from fear, but from excitement. She speaks quickly, swallowing her words. My father designed this. 20 years of work. Pumps, automatic seeders, reversible windmills, solar trackers. Look at this. Dan looks, and he freezes. Master Pak's blueprints are magnificent, precise, elegant, with load calculations and tolerances. This man was a genius. He lived in a world without electricity or computers and designed machines that, in Dan's world, would have appeared in the 19th century, maybe even earlier. And he was killed for it. Dan silently flips through the blueprints. He finds a pump, the very one for which Paka was executed. A piston pump, with a valve system that allows it to pump continuously rather than in jerks, with a flywheel to store momentum. This isn't just a pump, it's an engineering masterpiece. Dan looks up at Soyeon. She's standing there waiting, shaking all over, waiting for him to say something, that it's nonsense, or that it's dangerous, or that she needs to leave and take her papers back. Your father was a great engineer. Soyeon covers her face with her hands. Her shoulders shake. She cries silently and fiercely. For 3 years, she's carried these blueprints, and not a single person has ever said those words to her. Dan waits. He doesn't touch her. He doesn't offer words of comfort. He just stands beside her and waits until she's ready. 5 minutes later, she takes her hands away. Her eyes are red. Her face is wet. Her voice is hoarse. I want to finish building his machines. Every single one of them. Dan nods. We'll finish them. But first, just one. The one he was killed for. The pump. We'll install it on the well in Saffron and sign it with his name. Soyeon looks at him. Her lips tremble. Then she does something Dan doesn't expect. She takes the pump blueprint and kisses the corner of it. For good luck, she says. That's what my father used to do. For the next 3 weeks, Soyeon and Mira work together. It's quite a sight. Mira is calm and precise. Soyeon is explosive and chaotic. Mira cuts the metal along the line. Soyeon bends it by eye and gets it more accurate than the line. They argue every hour. They agree every 2. By the end of the 3rd week, Master Park's pump is installed on the saffron well. A bronze plaque is mounted on the housing. Master Park, engineer. Soyeon stands nearby, speechless. Mira stands next to her and silently holds her hand. Dan starts the pump. The blades catch the wind. The flywheel spins. The piston pumps. Water rises from a depth that was previously inaccessible. Clean, cold, plenty of it. The saffron well, which had been slowly dying, has been given a second life, thanks to a machine built from a dead man's parts, assembled by his daughter and a young blacksmith at the edge of the world. That evening, Soyeon kisses the pump on the forehead, for good luck. Aira, who happens to be passing by at that moment, stops and stares with an expression of utter cultural shock. Then she shakes her head and walks on. She isn't used to it yet. Year 1, Month 12. Dan stands on the northern hill and looks down. The saffron is green. Not all of it, not like in his dreams, but it's green. The shrubs along the protective wall have grown taller than a person's waist. Some have sent out side shoots. Grass grows among them. Real grass that wasn't planted. It came on its own. The contoured plantings on the southern slope have turned into a strip of dark green, 3 rows of shrubs. Between them, wild grasses and one type of creeping plant with small white flowers that Hannah had found near the eastern ravine and transplanted to stabilize the soil. It had spread faster than anyone expected and now covered the area between the rows with a dense, living carpet. The first grove, 12 trees. The saplings were brought by a caravan from the south 3 months ago. Yasmin made the arrangements. She paid for them out of her own savings. She didn't tell Dan. He found out when the trees were already in the ground. Each one as tall as an adult's chest. Slender, fragile, but alive, with real leaves that rustle in the wind. Saffron's children touch the bark. Many of them have never seen a tree before. To them, it's a miracle. An incomprehensible living thing that stands upright and doesn't fall over, and whose green leaves flutter at the top. A little girl about 5 years old walks up to a tree and hugs the trunk. She stands there for a long time. No one tells her to step away. Dan stands on the hill and watches this. His throat tightens. He turns away and pretends to check the nets. A year. Just 1 year. The empty hill has become a place where children hug trees. He thinks about his past life, about the lab in New Mexico, about the prototype water collector he didn't have time to finish. There it was work. Here it's life. There were charts and reports and meetings. Here a girl is hugging a tree. He doesn't want to go back. The thought comes quietly, and he accepts it without resistance. He doesn't want to go back. Era Alzarin appeared in Saffron 2 months ago, quietly, without fanfare. She arrived at night, alone, with a sword and a travel bag. Yasmin brought her here after finding her at a trading post halfway along the route. Era, 20 years old, the youngest daughter of Hakim Alzarin, the head of the largest water clan in the southern kingdoms, the very one who sent mercenaries to kill Dan, the very one who killed Majid. Yasmin introduced her briefly. She ran away. She knows their plans. She's on our side. Dan looked at Era and saw what an engineer sees. Material. Not in a bad way, in a professional way. She stands up straight, shoulders back, chin up. Her hands are calm, but her right hand is slightly closer to her belt, where her sword had been before Yasmin asked her to take it off. She's trained. She's dangerous. She's used to power and control. And she's come to the people her family wants to destroy. Why? Era explained later, alone with Dan and Yasmin. Her father had struck a deal with the Church of the Single Flame. Era was to be married off to the Inquisitor Cassius Verne, a political alliance. The clan would receive the Church's support in eliminating its rivals. The Church would gain access to the clan's water resources. Era was the commodity in this deal, the packaging for a political alliance. She found out 3 days before the wedding. Not about the wedding itself, but about who Cassius Verne really was. An Inquisitor investigator. A man who burned 4 villages for heresy against the divine Kara. A man who sincerely believes that the desert is a punishment and that every green sprout is an insult to God. She was being married off to a man who destroys what Dan builds. She left at night, through the window, with the sword her grandfather had given her when she was 7. With a single thought. She is no longer a clan resource. She is a person. The first few weeks in Saffron are tough, for everyone. Era was used to servants and marble floors and having people listen to her when she spoke. Here, no one listens to her. Here there are clay floors and communal water and work from dawn till dusk. She doesn't complain, not once, but she doesn't know what to do. She knows how to fence. She knows how to lead people. She knows how to negotiate. But swords aren't needed here. Here, they need hands that dig, build, and plant. Dan watches her for a week. Then he comes over and says, "I need help." She's on guard. "What kind?" Refugees are arriving in Safran, 2 or 3 a week, from dying settlements, from parched farms, from cities where the price of water has become higher than people can afford. Among them are children, many children. They have nowhere else to go. There's no one to teach them, no one to explain the world to them. I need someone to open a school for them. Era looks at him. A school? Yes, for refugee children. You want me to teach the children? I want you to lead it. Organize it. Build a place where children can learn to read and count and understand how the world works. Era is silent for a long time. Then she says quietly, "I've never done anything like this before." Dan nods. "I know. That's the whole point." She opens the school in 2 weeks. A canopy made of fabric, rocks instead of benches, sticks for writing in the sand. 17 children, ages 5 to 12. The first lesson. Era stands before them in her fancy clothes, which are already covered in dust, and doesn't know what to say. The children look at her. Hungry, wary, quiet. She sits down on the sand, at their level, and says, "My name is Ira. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to try. You'll help me." The children exchange glances. An 8-year-old boy with scraped knees and a serious expression speaks up. "Will they give us water?" Ira takes out a canteen. She hands it to him. "Drink." He drinks. He passes it to the boy next to him. That boy drinks. The canteen makes its way around the circle. It comes back empty. Ira looks at the empty flask and, for the first time in her life, understands something that cannot be understood from a marble palace. Thirst. Not a word, not a concept. Real thirst. The thirst of real children who don't know if there will be water tomorrow. That evening she goes to see Dan. Her eyes are dry. Her voice is steady. "I need more water for the school, and food, and fabric for the roof because in a month the hot wind season will begin and the children can't sit out in the open sun." Dan looks at her. The 20-year-old daughter of a water magnate stands before him and demands resources for a school made of clay and sticks. She isn't asking, she's demanding. As if it were her right, as if 17 starving children sitting on rocks were the most important matter in the world. He nods. It will be done. Ira turns and walks away. The next day, the school already has a roof. Mira put it up overnight. Year 2, spring. Rasul sends a messenger from the Valley of Dawn. The water collection system is working. 8 nets stand at the mouth of the valley where the wind from the sea passes through like a funnel. 140 liters a day. 20 families who were preparing to die are now drinking and watering their first garden beds. Rasul writes briefly. "People were crying. Then they began digging ditches. I showed them how. They understood." A week later, a second messenger arrives, from Noura. Tears of Miran. The dried-up oasis has come back to life. Noura found an aquifer 4 meters deep. She installed a pump based on Master Pack's blueprints. Water began flowing on the 3rd day, clear, fresh. Refugees are already settling around the new well. 12 people. There will be more by summer. Dan reads the reports and feels something expand in his chest. It's working. The network is working. He's not the only one. It's not just his hands. His knowledge in the hands of others is doing the same thing. The principle has been confirmed. He turns to Mira. She's standing at the workbench, reading over his shoulder. Her face is calm, but her eyes are shining. 3 out of 7. 4 more. Dan nods. 4 more. He sends the 3rd team to the valley the caravanners call the Wind's Throat, the 4th to the ruins of the bridge over the dead Tass River. Both teams are led by the students, people taught not by Dan, but by Rasul and Noura, the 2nd generation. Knowledge multiplies. Soyan works nonstop. She builds pumps, 3 a month, each one better than the last. She adds her own ideas to her father's design. A double valve that doesn't jam when sand is suspended in the water. A filter screen at the inlet. A collapsible frame that can be transported on a single lizard and assembled on site in a day. She kisses each finished pump on the forehead before shipping it. Mira rolls her eyes. Hana smiles. Era turns away, but Dan notices that she once quietly touched the pump's casing with her fingertips before it was taken away. No one saw, except for Dan. Era's school is growing. 32 children, 4 classes a day. Reading, arithmetic, the structure of the world, and a new subject that Era introduced on her own, without Dan's permission. She named it simply, water. In this class, the children learn to build small mist collectors out of sticks and rags. Each child makes their own, small, the size of a palm. It doesn't produce water, almost, 1 drop per night. But the children carry them with them and check them every morning, counting the drops and arguing over who has more. They're learning not to be afraid of the desert. They're learning to see water where there seems to be none. Dan finds out about this from Tala. Tala, 16 years old, an orphan, a scout. A wild, quick-witted girl who sleeps on rooftops and eats with her hands and knows the wasteland like the back of her hand. She joined the team 4 months ago. Dan found her on the road, halfway from Saffron. She was lying under a rock, curled up in a ball. No water, no food, no strength. He carried her in his arms. She fought and bit for the first 2 days. On the 3rd day, Mira set a bowl of porridge and a glass of water in front of her and said, "Eat. No one's going to take it away." Tala ate slowly. She drank half the glass of water. She left the rest. For later. She always leaves half. Dan noticed this 2 months later. Every glass, every flask. Halfway. She can't finish drinking. Her parents died of thirst in her arms. She saw them drink the last drops. And the drops ran out. Ever since then, she hasn't been able to finish drinking. Always for later. What if it runs out? What if there's no tomorrow? Dan goes to the workshop at night. He works until morning. A small flask, made of copper, with a mechanical lock that only she knows how to open, with a spring-loaded level indicator on the side. The needle shows how much water is inside. He fills the flask. In the morning, he gives it to Tala. "It's yours. Always full. No one will touch it." Tala takes the flask. She turns it over in her hands. She clicks the lock, opens it, closes it, looks at the pointer. Then she presses it to her chest and walks away without saying a word. From that day on, the canteen hangs around her neck, always. She doesn't take it off even when she sleeps. Summer of the 2nd year. It's hot. The wasteland is advancing. 8 kilometers a year. Dan can see it from satellite images. No, wait. Not from satellite images. From the markers that Mira stuck into the ground half a year ago at the edge of the plantings. The sand has crept 4 meters closer. In half a year. The forest strip is holding, but the sand is bypassing it on both sides. It needs to be widened. More plantings are needed. More people. More time. There's no time. Fall of the 2nd year. They're not coming in secret, not at night, in broad daylight. Dust on the southern horizon is visible an hour before the signal post flares up copper red. An army. Not 5 mercenaries, not 10, 100, maybe more. On horseback and on foot, with a supply train, with siege ladders that are useless against clay walls but speak to their intentions. They didn't come to kill a single man. They came to wipe out Saffron. Yasmin stands on the hill next to Dan and counts. Her face is ashen. 120 fighters, 2 hydromancer mages in silver robes. These aren't mercenaries. Is this Alzaran clan's elite guard? And next to them, a banner, white with a golden flame. The church. The clan and the church together. The worst-case scenario. Dan watches, and his hands are cold despite the heat. 120 professional fighters against 40 families with pitchforks. Arithmetic that requires no calculations. But Dan is counting something else. He isn't counting people. He's counting the terrain. The southern road runs through the salt flats, 5 kilometers of open space with no water or shade. Then it climbs toward Saffron along a gentle slope past contour plantings. Then it passes between the northern hill and the defensive wall, a bottleneck. The army will march 5 kilometers in the heat, without water, because there's no water on the salt flats. Dan turns around and runs back down. He gathers the team: Mira, Yasmin, Hain, Soyon, Era, Tala, Farid. Everyone's in the basement. He speaks quickly. We have 6 hours, maybe 8. They'll set up camp at the edge of the plain for the night. They'll set out in the morning. They'll be here by noon. We have the night, Era says. I know their tactics. My father's guard advances in a wedge formation. The mages are in the center. They'll attack with water. They'll draw moisture from the well and use it as a weapon. Yasmin shudders. She knows what combat hydromancy is. Pressurized water cuts through stone. Dan nods. That's exactly why we won't be here when they arrive. Silence. What? We'll leave, everyone, at night. Women, children, the elderly, everyone. West, to the Dawn Gorge, to Rasul. Farid stands up. You want to abandon Saffron? I want to save Saffron. Dan unfolds the map. He points. The salt flats, 5 kilometers. The army will cross them in the morning and be dehydrated by noon. Their mages are strong, but magic drains their strength. The drier the surroundings, the more energy is consumed per liter. And it'll be very dry all around. Because we'll take all the water. All of it. From the well, from the reservoir, from the ditches, from every pot. We'll load it onto the lizards and leave. They'll arrive in an empty Saffron, without water, after a 5-kilometer march across the salt flats. And another surprise will await them. He points to a spot on the map above Saffron, the northern hill, the watershed, 12 grids, the reservoir. Mira. You can reroute the reservoir's outflow. Instead of channeling the water toward the settlement, direct it down the eastern slope. Mira looks at the map. The eastern slope is steep. If we open the reservoir, all the water will run off in minutes.
300 liters down the slope, over dry clay. It'll be a mudslide. A small one, but enough to turn the trail at the foot of the hill into an impassable, muddy mess. Dan nods. Exactly. They'll walk 5 kilometers across the salt flats. They'll enter the deserted Saffron. They won't find any water. They'll try to climb up to the watershed, and they'll get stuck in the mud. They won't get stuck. They'll get bogged down. They'll get stuck. They'll waste time. They'll waste their strength, and we'll be in the Valley of Dawn, with water, with people, with the blueprints, and they won't be able to pursue us because between us and them will be a desert they can't cross without water. He doesn't win with weapons. He wins with the terrain. Night. Saffron leaves, quietly, quickly. Women carry children. Men lead lizards laden with barrels of water. Era organizes the column. Her voice is steady and commanding. She knows how to direct the movement of people. She was taught this for someone else, but the skill is the same. Tala leaves last. She's checked all the checkpoints. She checked to make sure no one was left behind. She found an old woman who refused to leave and carried her on her back for half a kilometer until the old woman agreed to walk on her own. Dan and Mira stay behind. They're standing by the reservoir on the hill. Mira reset the release valve 3 hours ago. Quickly, exactly. No unnecessary movements. Now, one pull of the lever, and all the water will flow down the eastern slope. They're waiting for dawn. From below, they can see the army breaking camp and entering the salt flats. Neat rows, the glint of weapons, the mages' silver robes, the church's banner. They march with confidence. They think they're heading for a village of 40 households with a single mad stranger. Mira watches. Then she says, "It's time." Dan nods. They open the reservoir. The water flows out, 300 liters down the slope. The clay softens, the rocks shift. The flow is small, but the path at the foot of the hill turns into a sticky, dark swamp. They descend the hill on the other side and head west, quickly, without looking back. By noon, the army enters Saffron, empty. No people, no water, no food, no blueprints. Only mud brick houses and a dry well from which Mira had removed the pump as a parting gift. 20 horsemen try to go around the hill. They get stuck in the mud. The lizards refuse to move. The men sink knee-deep into the mud. By evening, Al's guard, Zarin, stands in an empty village without water after a full day's march across the salt flats. Their mages have exhausted their power trying to draw moisture from the depths of the well. They found little, very little. The guard commander looks at the empty houses, the muddy mess on the hillside, and the 12 nets catching moisture from the air, and slowly realizes he has lost. Not a battle. There was no battle. He lost to the landscape. Dawn Gorge welcomes Saffron. 200 people in a valley meant for 30. It's cramped, it's difficult, but there is water. Rasul is prepared. His 8 nets provide enough for everyone if they can serve. Kane immediately sets up a lab. Soyan repairs the pump that jammed during transport. Mira counts the losses. Master Pak's pump was left behind in Saffron. She didn't have time to remove it completely. She only took the piston block and the valves. She left the ram behind. When Soyan finds out, she goes behind a rock and stays silent there for a long time. Then she returns and says, "I'll make a new one, a better one." A week later, news arrives. The army has left Saffron. They took what they could. They burned down several houses. They broke through the defensive wall in 3 places. But they didn't touch the water collection system on the hill. They didn't understand what it was, or didn't consider it important. Burlap nets on sticks. Who would pay attention to that? Yasmin laughs when she hears this, a bitter laugh. They burned the houses, but left behind what rebuilds the world, because they can't see. Because to them, sticks and rags can't be more important than walls. Dan doesn't laugh. He's thinking. Saffron can be restored. Clay houses can be built in a week. A wall can be rebuilt. The trees are still standing. The bushes are still standing. The roots in the ground are alive. You can't burn the plantings. They're too green, too damp. Fire doesn't take to living earth. A month later, Dan leads the group back. 30 people. Mira, Soyan, 10 builders. They enter Saffron at dawn, quietly, carefully. Tala went ahead 2 hours before them. She checked. No one's there. The army left and didn't leave a garrison behind. Why leave a garrison in an empty village with no water? They don't know that the water will return on its own, that the nets on the hill catch moisture every night, that the drainage ditches collect condensation, that the bacteria in the soil keep working. Saffron isn't dead. Saffron is sleeping. Recovery takes 6 weeks. New houses, a new wall, longer than the old one. A second row of shrubs behind the wall adds a sense of peace, double protection. Soyan installs a new pump on the well, better than the old one, just as she promised, with a triple valve system and a protective cover against sand. A plaque on the housing. Master Pak, engineer. Second Vern. People are returning, not just the residents of Saffron, newcomers, refugees who've heard there's water and greenery here, that the clan's army was driven out of here, that a man lives here who does the impossible. By late fall, there are 300 people in Saffron, twice as many as before. Dan is scaling up the water collection system, 20 nets on the hill, 2 new reservoirs. The system of channels has been expanded. Hain is preparing the concentrate on an industrial scale. She now has 3 assistants whom she has trained. They call themselves the Daughters of the Soil, and Hain blushes every time she hears it. One evening, Era comes to see Dan. She is silent for a long time. Then she says, "My father will send more." "I know. Next time he won't send the guard. He'll come himself." "With what?"
with the kingdom's army. He'll convince the king that you're a threat, that you machines are heresy, that the greenery on the edge of the wasteland is an insult to Kara. The church will back him up. Inquisitor Cassius Verne is already preaching in the capital. He says the desert is a test, that anyone who tries to stop it is an enemy of God and humanity. And people are listening, because he feeds them, because he builds shelters for orphans, because he's sincere. Dan listens. Then he asks a question he's been carrying inside him for a long time. Do you know anything about the ancient machine? Era looks up. The machine, under the sands, the one that caused the wilting 300 years ago. Era is silent. Then she speaks slowly. My grandfather used to tell me about it when I was little. He said the drought wasn't a ritual performed by mages, that there was a machine built by a man from another world. He was trying to help, trying to change the climate, but he miscalculated. The machine spun out of control. It drank up the rivers. It scorched the earth. It's been running ever since, beneath the sands. Quietly, slowly. It draws moisture from the aquifers and disperses it into the upper layers of the atmosphere, from where it vanishes forever. The church knows. They found some random records and decided that this was proof that human pride always leads to disaster, that the desert is a well-deserved punishment, and that anyone who tries again will be a new destroyer. Dan sits quietly. The bracelet on his wrist pulses, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. He finally understands, not with his head, with his body. The bracelet is a fragment of that machine. It doesn't just help him learn the language and read the landscape. It's calling to the machine. Home. Dan isn't the first one to be called, but he's the first to arrive with the right knowledge. Warriors and mages and kings came before. The planet sent out a signal and received power, but it didn't need a sword.
It needed an engineer.
Year 3. Winter. The Greenbelt consists of 7 valleys. All 7 are operational, each with its own watershed, with its own team of trained artisans, with its own plantings and tree belts. 4,000 people live along the edge of the wasteland in settlements that didn't exist 2 years ago or were dying out. Dan looks at the map in Farid's basement and counts. 7 green dots on a 1. 7 small islands of life in an ocean of dead sand. It's not enough. The wasteland advances 8 kilometers a year. The Greenbelt has slowed it to 5 kilometers in the planting zone. But beyond the belt, everything remains the same. The earth is dying. The aquifers are drying up, 3 meters deeper every year. The machine is running. Somewhere beneath thousands of metric tons of sand, it pulls and pulls and pulls moisture from the ground. As long as it's running, the Greenbelt is a bandage on a wound that won't heal. Yasmin finds a map, an old one, a very old one, from a merchant who doesn't even know what he's selling. A leather scroll with symbols found in no modern alphabet. But Dan's bracelet reacts to them. It heats up. It pulses. The gears inside turn when Dan holds his hand over certain symbols. Hain deciphers part of the text over the course of 3 weeks. She's not a linguist, but the Alchemists Guild used a similar writing system for old recipes. The city of Issachar, the capital of the world before the drying, buried beneath the sands in the heart of the wasteland. 12 days' journey southeast of Saffron. That's where the machine is. Dan is assembling a team, the whole team. Mira, Yasmin, Hain, Soyan, Aira, Tala. 7 people. Him and 6 women, each of whom knows how to do something he doesn't. Mira knows mechanics and can fix anything that breaks along the way. Yasmin can sense water and will guide them through the arid stretches. Hain carries a bacterial concentrate and a first aid kit with 20 different remedies for any eventuality. Soyan carries tools and spare parts for the mechanisms they might encounter down there. Aira knows tactics and will protect the group if they encounter enemies. Tala knows the wasteland. Every dune, every rock, every sign of a storm 2 hours before it begins. Dan is carrying the bracelet, the key. They set out at dawn. Safran sees them off in silence. Farid stands at the gate. He isn't going. Someone has to stay behind and protect everything they've built. He hugs Dan, tightly, like a son. He says nothing. There's no need. 12 days across the wasteland of silence. Dan thought he knew what a desert was. He'd worked in the Sahel, in Arizona. He'd seen arid lands. He'd never seen anything like this. The wasteland of silence isn't a desert. It's an absence of life, an absence of sound, an absence of color, except for red and white. Even the wind is different here. It doesn't blow, it presses down. Heavy, hot air settles on your shoulders and pushes you into the sand. Tala leads the way. She knows the paths that aren't on the maps, passages between the dunes, rocky clearings where you can sleep without fear of being buried, rare depressions where moisture lies beneath the crust of salt. Yasmin finds water twice. Both times she's on the verge of exhaustion. She lies down on the sand and presses her palms against the ground, her face contorted with effort. Then she points. Here, a meter down. They dig. There's water, murky, salty. Kane filters it through a cloth filter with charcoal. It's drinkable. On the 8th day, they find ruins. Walls jut out of the sand like the ribs of a dead beast, a huge beast. The city of Issachar was vast. Dan sees the remains of aqueducts, fountains, wide avenues buried up to their cornices. Tens of thousands lived here, maybe hundreds of thousands, and all of it died in the days when the machine spun out of control. Tala finds an entrance, a gap in the sand between two collapsed columns. Steps lead downward into the darkness, into the coolness. They descend. Soyan lights torches made of oil-soaked cloth. The light falls on the fresco-covered walls, rivers, gardens, trees, children playing in fountains. The world as it was 300 years ago. Mira touches the fresco with her fingertips. She whispers, "Beautiful." Dan doesn't answer. He stares ahead. The corridor leads downward, deeper, toward the heart of the city, toward the machine. The bracelet on his wrist is hot. The gears turn ceaselessly. He senses the direction, like a compass. This way, down, home. The machine is waiting. The machine's chamber is enormous. The ceiling is lost in the darkness. The walls are made of a stone Dan has never seen anywhere else in this world. Smooth, dark, veined with metal that glows faintly greenish. The floor is covered with channels. Hundreds of grooves radiate from the center like the roots of a tree. Water flows through the grooves. The only running water the team has seen in 12 days of travel. It flows toward the center, toward the machine. The machine is unlike anything from either of Dan's worlds. It is not a mechanism with gears. It is not a magical altar. It is a structure, organic and metallic at the same time. A column 5 stories high, entwined with pipes and roots and something halfway between wires and vines. It hums, low, steady, 300 years without stopping. For 300 years, it has been drawing water from the continent's aquifers upward through rock and sand and dispersing it into the upper layers of the atmosphere. For 300 years, it has been drying up the world. Dan stands at the base and looks up. The bracelet is scorching hot. He can barely stand the heat, but he doesn't take it off. The gears are spinning so fast that the metal trembles on his wrist. Here's the key. Here's the lock. He walks around the machine. He touches the surface. He examines it. His brain works the way it always has, without panic, without mysticism. He sees a system, a complex one, an alien one, but a system nonetheless. And every system has its logic, inputs and outputs, causes and effects. He figures it out within an hour. The machine pumps water upward from the depths to the surface and beyond like a giant pump. But a pump that runs not on the energy of springs or wind, but on magic, on the residual energy of the ritual that the previous castaway embedded in its design. The ritual was supposed to end in a year, in 10 years, but the time traveler connected the machine to the aquifers and created a feedback loop. The more water it pumps, the more energy it receives. A perpetual motion machine of destruction. It cannot be stopped. Yasmin confirms this. She can feel how the machine is intertwined with the water beneath their feet. To separate one from the other would mean rupturing the aquifers, a backlash, an earthquake, a water explosion. Everything they've built over the past 3 years will be destroyed, along with thousands of people. Dan nods. He knew this even before he came here. He's an engineer. He doesn't break systems. He reconfigures them.
Don't shut it down. Reverse it. The machine pumps water upward. That means it can pump water downward, from the atmosphere into the ground, from the clouds into the aquifers, from scattered moisture back into rivers, streams, and wells. We need to change the direction of the flow, not physically, logically. Reprogram the ritual. The console at the base of the machine. Dan spots it right away. A recess shaped like a bracelet. An exact match. Size, shape, the arrangement of the gears. The bracelet is the key. A fragment that the previous intruder lost or left behind on purpose. A beacon for whoever comes next. Dan turns to the team. 7 women stand in the machine's greenish light. Mira, calm, hands at her sides, ready to work, always ready. Yasmin, her robe is dusty, her eyes are sharp. She senses every drop in this hall. Hain, she clutches the bag of compounds to her chest. Her small ones are useless here, but she's here. Soyeon, she touches the machine's hull with an expression of an engineer's reverence. She sees the work of a master, a stranger, a dead man, but a master nonetheless. Era, hand on her sword. She's guarding the passage behind them. No one will get through. Tala, sitting on a rock and drinking from her flask, a small sip. She leaves half of it, always for later. Dan speaks. I need help from each of you. He points to the channels in the floor. 7 main channels radiate from the machine toward the walls. 7 rivers that once flowed through this world. Each channel leads to an opening in the wall. Beyond the opening, pipes run deep into the rock. Aquifers. When I insert the key, the machine will restart. It will stop for a few minutes. During those minutes, the channels must be open. All 7, at the same time. Each channel has a valve, a stone lever, a heavy one. Each one requires a person. There are 7 of them. And there are 7 of them. He explains to each one where to stand. He draws a diagram with charcoal on the floor. Mira at the first channel, Yasmin at the second, Hain at the third, Soyeon at the fourth, Era at the 5th, Tala at the 6th. Farida isn't there. The 7th channel. Dan watches. He thinks. Then he realizes. Channel 7 is him. He'll insert the key and run to the 7th lever. There won't be much time. Mira shakes her head. You won't make it. The distance from the console to Channel 7 is 20 meters. Dan isn't a runner. He's a 34-year-old engineer with bad knees. Tala stands up. Silently, she takes the flask off her neck. She hands it to Mira. I'm faster. She'll stand by the console. Dan will insert the key. Tala will run to the 7th channel. She's fast. She grew up in the desert. She runs like the wind. 20 meters takes her 3 seconds. Dan looks at her. She looks at him. Her eyes are serious, mature. She's 16, but right now she's 100. She nods. Let's go. Everyone takes their positions. Silence. The hum of the machine. A greenish light. Drops of water trickling down the walls. Dan stands at the console. He removes the bracelet from his wrist. The gears spin frantically. The metal is hot, alive. 3 years. 3 years since he woke up face down in the hot sand. 3 years of work. 3 years of people he's come to know and love.
3 years of droplets gathered from the air, sprouts breaking through the dead earth, children hugging trees, old people weeping over 100 cans of fresh water. 3 years for this one moment. He inserts the bracelet into the console. A click. Quiet. Precise. Like the final piece in a mechanism. The machine freezes. The hum subsides. Silence for the first time in 300 years. Absolute. Deafening. Dan screams. Now. 7 levers, 7 pairs of hands, all at once. Mira pulls hers with her eyes closed. Her face is calm. Yasmin slaps hers with her palm and shouts something in the language of the Guardians. Hain pushes with both hands and whispers, "Come on, my little ones." Soyan kisses the lever on the forehead before turning it. Era pulls steadily and silently, without emotion, like a soldier. Tala runs, 20 meters, 2.5 seconds. She leaps toward the lever, grabs it, pulls. It won't budge. She braces herself with her feet. She pulls with her whole body. The lever creaks and shifts. 7 channels are open. The machine shudders. The light changes. The green grows brighter, then blue, then white. The hum returns. A different one. Not the same as before. Not the heavy, oppressive sound of a dying world. Light. Rising. Like a breath after a long suffocation. The water in the channels changes direction. It was flowing toward the machine. Now it's flowing away from it, toward the walls, toward the pipes, toward the aquifers, downward, into the ground, back, home. Dan stands at the console and feels the floor tremble beneath his feet. Not an earthquake. Movement. Water is flowing through the rock, through the sand, through the dead clay, through roots that have been waiting for 300 years. Above them, thousands of kilometers of the wasteland. The 7 valleys of the Greenbelt, 4,000 people. And somewhere at this very moment, in each of the 7 valleys, the same thing is happening. Clouds, dark, low, impossible. And water is falling from them. Drops, sparse at first, then more frequently, then in a wall of rain. Rain. The first rain in 300 years. In Saffron, Farid stands in the middle of the courtyard and looks up. Water falls on his face. He doesn't move. He doesn't close his eyes. He stands there and cries. Children run through the streets with their mouths agape. They catch the drops. They laugh. They shout. They don't know what this is. They've never seen rain. The old man who watered his namesake bush every day with his own ration stands by the wall and watches as water pours from the sky onto his bush. For free. Endlessly. He sits down in the mud and can't get up. In the Dawn Gorge, Rasul runs out of his shelter and screams. He just screams, without words. At Era's school, 17 children press themselves against the window and watch. One boy, the same one with the scraped knees, whispers, "That's the water from up above, the one the teacher told us about." Downstairs in the hall of the machines of the world, she stands by her channel and looks up. Water seeps through cracks in the ceiling. Drops fall onto her face. She speaks softly. "Dan, can you hear me? It's water." She's heading home. Dan stands at the console. His hands rest on the metal, which is no longer hot, just warm, calm, like a living body. He replies, "We called her, all of us together." Tala stands by the 7th lever. She's wet from the water seeping through the stone. She looks at her hands. Then she slowly raises her head. Her lips move. She whispers something no one can hear. Then she takes her canteen out of her pocket. Mira had been holding it all this time, but Tala took it back when the lever clicked into place. She opens the canteen. She looks at the water inside, half full, as always, for later.
She stands there for a long time. Rain seeps through the stone and drips onto her hands, onto the canteen, and onto the floor. Then Tala does something she hasn't done since her parents died of thirst in her arms. She raises the canteen to her lips and drinks it all the way to the bottom. All of it, down to the last drop. Then she closes her eyes and presses the empty canteen to her chest. It's raining up above. The 7 rivers haven't returned yet. The wasteland has not yet receded. Years of work lie ahead, decades, perhaps a generation. But the course has changed. The machine no longer destroys the world. It heals it. And somewhere in Saffron, on the blueprint lying on the workbench in Mira's workshop, in the lower right corner, a small heart is drawn. Drawn in charcoal. Neat. Dan knows about it. He's known for a long time, and when they return, he'll take some charcoal and draw his own heart next to hers. Small, crooked, an engineer's heart, but real.